Hey guys, last week I was my first Pariah Nexus tournament and was very happy to see a couple of newcomers there. Looking at their mistakes, today I want to share with you my top 5 easy tips for your first 40k tournament. So without further ado, let's dive right in. If you've already been to a 40k tournament, I still think that this is going to be useful for you because I've seen multiple experienced players make the same mistakes over and over again. The first one is recognizing the fact that you are a biocomputer, only capable of thinking as well as your body allows you. That's why, especially before your first tournament, as a very stressful thing, and it will be stressful no matter what you do, you should make sure that you get a good night's sleep. You should avoid heavy meals so that you don't feel bloated when you're playing. That's the worst thing ever. I forbid you're gonna have a diarrhea or something because of Taco Bell. If you just eat too much, you're gonna feel sluggish, especially in the first round. That's where in most cases it will be the hardest for you because it's literally the first game you've ever played in this setting. You should take snacks with you that provide you with that sustained energy, something like nuts and fruits, but also I would do a couple of sweets, obviously depending on your diet, because that really helps your brain think. You should depart early to the tournament and avoid any last minute rush or stress, because if you're rushing to get to your table, that means you will be very tired even before the first game begins, and it will be tiring. Even an RTT, not a GT, you will have 3 games in one day, and that's more than you have probably ever played in your life. Also, arriving early allows you to calmly set up your models onto a tray, and by the way, take the tray with you because some venues don't have trays with them, especially in America. That will allow you to calm down, have your models on the tray, just look at them and prepare for the game mentally, not thinking about strategy or tactics, anything like that, just recognizing the fact you're going to be playing against someone you don't know in a few minutes. I've actually had so many situations when I broke off small pieces of my models just pulling them out of the foam case, and that is because I was rushing. And also from the tactical standpoint, those extra couple of minutes that you might have if you're not rushing to the table will give you more time to ask your opponent questions. And considering you are of course a beginner, you need to be asking questions. You never should be shying away from asking, like, what is this unit capable of doing? How far does this tank move? Or how well does it shoot? Like obvious things. How well does a tank shoot? How well does a melee unit fight? And how far it can move? Simple things. Most opponents will be more than happy to answer those questions, believe me. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40k coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Next is tape measure is your best friend. This advice is as important for a beginner as it's for the best pro player in the world. It is really the most important tool you have in your arsenal because everything in Warhammer lives and dies on the movement. Before the game starts, use the tape measure to check the basic distances, especially for turn 1. What I mean by that is ask your opponent questions about how far their units can move in first turn. It will serve several purposes. First, your opponent will know that you actually are paying attention to those things. You're not going to be, well, at least in their mind, stupid enough to put something right in front of them and up for charging and shooting. And if you do make a mistake, which is absolutely normal for a beginner, don't worry about that. But even if you do make a mistake, your opponent will still have in the back of their mind that you've been asking for this, so maybe it's a plan you have. Things you should be asking is a first turn dip strike, so some armies do have that. Grey Knights have ability to deep strike turn 1 if you have went first, you being their opponents, or some enhancements in the game allow turn 1 deep strike, and you need to be aware of that. Next is advance and charge. So fast units that can advance and charge, so roll an extra d6 in addition to their movement, and charge after that are something you should worry about. Things like transports. Land Raider can move 12 inches and then disembark the unit inside, and that unit still can charge. Auto advancing, so things like Sisters, Repentia that can just substitute a dice for their advance roll and automatically advance 6 are also something you need to be aware of. So ask your opponents about their most expensive units. Those units are most likely going to be the ones that are most dangerous, and therefore the ones that you should pay attention to in your turn, especially before the game starts in your turn 1. Information you're gonna get there is for planning your deployment and avoiding the early threats, because you need your resources to be able to do something in the game. And if you're gonna lose a bunch of stuff in turn 1 and 2, that's exactly what more experienced players want you as a beginner to do. They want you to expose everything and just let them pick everything you have in your army apart. That's how games are usually lost by beginners, is just by making a very stupid mistake early on, and then losing a very significant portion of your army and not being able to come back because you don't have the experience of playing as an underdog, as someone who is already on the back foot. But when you're going to be deploying your units, make sure to hide everything as much as possible. You would be better off if you have measured the basic distance to, say, the central objective. So how much are you gonna need to roll on your unit that is dedicated to getting the objectives, like something, I don't know, scouts or jump back intercessors in Space Marines, something cheap that you want to throw on an objective and make your opponent do something about that. Knowing how much you're going to need to roll in advance, or if you need advance at all, is important to know. So don't just hide everything in the furthest ruin in your deployment zone, because in most cases you will just be left out of the game for too long. You need to position your units that have longer range further back, and units that are less important and maybe a bit more durable up closer to the front. During the game, keep an eye on your opponent's most dangerous units. And yes, the easiest way you can understand what those units are and what they can do is simply straight up asking your opponent which units in your army I need to be worried about. It is that simple, because in 99% of cases they will be more than happy to give you the answer. And of course they know their army better than you are, because it's their army. So they will not only say which unit that is and what it does, they'll also probably let you know about any stratagems or synergies they have in the army and what you need to be wary of. And most players at net have the decency to let the beginner player know about everything they really need to, because in my experience, beginner players will probably forget half of that information anyway. So you as a beginner, you will always be on the back foot. That is okay. You're there to learn. You're not there to win your first tournament from the first go, but you are better off at least having that information so that your brain starts practicing keeping that all sort of in check. And then as time goes on, as you gain experience, you'll be able to have more of those things in your rapid access memory instead of your hard disk. You don't really use that. It just lies there, using the computer metaphors. If there's anything you need to remember to do is just keep those alpha, so most dangerous units, on the end of your measuring tape always. Even if it's just going to be only for show, believe me, it's gonna worry your opponents. If you're constantly like fidgeting with your tape measure and you're thinking about something, and you're sometimes not when they are doing something with the models, because that's impolite, but when they're done moving their unit and then you start measuring things and you're like, you're mumbling something to yourself, it's gonna be making your opponent, even if it's someone experienced, is gonna make them wary, because chances are they also don't know that you are a beginner if you don't say that, and then they might think, well, this guy must have some sort of plan in their head, and they start worrying. They maybe even start trying to counter the plan you never had, and that is a positive thing for you. Next is, when in doubt, hide. It's a very simple advice and it works, believe me. If you are unsure about your opponent's capabilities, you are unable to get an answer from them or something like that, it is better, almost always in your case as a beginner, to play it safe, especially for units that are not really contributing to the damage output that much now in this turn. It does not mean, however, that you need to always stay behind ruins all game and do nothing, because that's not gonna work in most cases. You will need to sometimes get out of the ruins to go on objectives, to get do actions, perform some sort of card that you've drawn, and etc. And of course you just need to engage your opponent, and for that, in almost all situations, you need to get out of ruins. But for a beginner player, you're almost always going to be better off keeping an asset, meaning a unit you have, safe if that does not give you an immediate, and I'm saying immediate, return on your investment. So yes, pulling out a tank from ruin to shoot an important monster your opponent has, and that tank is efficient against that monster, is a good idea, because you are now getting value from that tank. If you are not getting any return on your investment, you're just losing security for that unit for no reason. And believe me, I've seen so many cases of people doing that. You will be shocked at how many times I've seen a unit that was just pulled out of the ruin to stand in the open for no reason whatsoever. Example, example, you have a unit of scouts in your Space Marine army that you send to grab an objective for you. You can put them behind the wall and still control the objective, or you can put them beyond the wall in front of it and then shoot the nice missile launcher they have and a couple of shots with their Stardust shotguns. What is the better option here? Yes, you're gonna get extra value from those scouts, and maybe, just maybe, that missile launcher can be that one shot that finishes off a rhino, opens it up for you to charge the contents. Sometimes things like that happen. When you are an experienced player, you will be able to calculate those averages and see if potentially it's a good idea for you. As a beginner, you don't have the capacity to calculate those things and don't have the experience to just sort of feel them. So in most cases, attempting to optimize, quote unquote in this case, would be detrimental for you. Remember, a unit that is alive and out of position can still contribute to you later in the game, whereas a destroyed unit is gone for good. Next is practice, and I mean it. You need to practice. All of these advice are for your first tournament, but it must not mean your first game of 40k, and it should not mean your 10th game of 40k either. For your first tournament, you need to know your rules very well, and I don't even mean the core rules. Of course you need to know them well, very well. Also need to know your army specific rules very well, so that anytime your opponent asks you, what is the strength of that gun, or what is the toughness of this transport, you need to know the answer without checking the app. It's okay to forget a thing or two. I always do that myself. Sometimes I don't remember what exactly is the AP of this attack, or maybe how far does this unit move. It's fine to not remember everything. Warhammer has so many rules. It's okay. However, if you don't remember anything or close to anything, it's gonna take away from your ability to actually play the game, and safe to say it's not going to be that pleasant of an experience for your opponent either. Most beginners struggle not knowing what their opponent's army does, and they will likely also encounter that. But if you know everything, at least that your models do, it will make your puzzle solving experience much easier. You need to practice playing a 3-hour long game with your buddies at the club as well, because unlike playing in the club, in a tournament, you only have 3 hours and that's it. You don't get any more. If you need that, even if you are that close to victory, you are not gonna have that extra time. Maybe if there is a break, sometimes judges, they allow you to play into the break, but that's up to your opponent usually. Should not hope for that. Sometimes you don't even get 3 hours, sometimes you get 2.5 hours to finish the game. It's not a lot of time, especially when you are in a stressful situation like a tournament where you're not really accustomed to that. It's a good idea to not only practice just playing 3-hour-long games, but also have a basic mental idea of where your unit should go, so how your average deployment on an average table looks like. Information about terrain layouts is usually available well in advance before the tournament, so I recommend to go onto the tournament's information page and read about the terrain layouts and the missions they're going to be playing, and then look at those missions in the tournament compendium that is officially available for free on the Warhammer community webpage in the download section. So look at those tables, look at the terrain layouts, and just imagine how you would be deploying your army. Even if it's just a very basic plan, even if you make mistakes there, it's still better than not having any plan at all. It will also teach you to play the games till the end, because one thing I've always been teaching on this channel is that you should never give up when something unthinkable happens. I have seen so many games lost by my opponents when they thought that the unit that was just unkillable was killed, and they're like, oh no, this game is lost. There's nothing I can do. Even when they have most of the army in a good situation, and they might not understand that, but when I just had a streak of luck, it usually statistically means that their streak of luck is right around the corner, and if you're gonna end the game at that point, you're never gonna get to see that streak of luck, and you're never gonna get to utilize it. That's why you should always try to play until the end, even if you feel like the game is totally lost. I give you much more experience as well as a beginner, because if you just finish your game turn 1 or turn 2, and you're not gonna play the turn 3, 4, and 5, even if you're not gonna win, you're still gonna get much more of the 40k experience if you finish the game. Lastly, do your homework. Of course, in a perfect world, we would be playing, everyone knows everyone's every move, every combination, every rule, everything. But it doesn't work like this. Even very experienced players I meet on every tournament, they might have been playing 40k for 10 years, 20 years. They might have been pro players for longer than I have been alive, but they will still not know something, and it is okay to not know everything. 40K has way too many rules for a sane human to know everything. And as a beginner, of course, you should not even hope to know even half of 40K's armies by heart. What you can do, and what I say would bring you the most advantage without overloading your brain or wasting too much time, because trying to learn everything is just gonna make your brain explode and you're not gonna really remember anything, is take the tournament that you're gonna go to and go back 1 month or however often this tournament happens and look at the rosters that have won the tournament and took second and third place. If there are identical armies, just skip the identical army and then move on to the next spot. So take 1, 3, and 4 if the second spot is the same as the first one in terms of the faction. And what I want you to do is look at that roster, look at the most expensive units, and look at the detachment, and then go and read about that detachment on the internet. You don't need to buy the codex, just try and find the information, and it's available online, believe me. Chances are one of those, and sometimes even 2, maybe 3, but that's unlikely, of those armies are going to be something that you encounter in the tournament as well. It might not be the same players, it might not be the same list, but you will be much better prepared compared to you just knowing your core rules, your army's rules, and nothing else. Of course, watching battle reports with armies you don't know is also very helpful, so go watch a couple of vf.miniatures battle reports whilst you're at it. Take a look at those detachments you find, read about what those detachments can do, about the combos they carry, combos meaning unit plus leader plus enhancement, and stratagems they can use. Believe me, this will help in addition to the practice you've already done with your army and some armies of your opponents in the club. I wish you all the best. Let your first tournament be a very joyful experience. If you've seen this video and you have already been to a tournament, then I wish you best of luck anyways. If I've missed an important tip, please let me know, because I very well might have. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.